Hey guys, how's it going? Robert Warshak here, and in this video I'm going to be going over, in my opinion, the best 5 budget decks that you can play currently on ladder with the new Saviors of Uldum cards out. Some of these decks have some of the new cards, some of these decks have no new cards at all. I tried to mix it up and make the decks as cheap as possible, but also adding a lot of diversity in like how they play and the style of deck that we have. Also, for each deck that we'll have that we go over, I'll have another additional deck guide where we only play that deck and I go over how to play it and all that good stuff. So we changed up how we do our budgets. Normally I do a couple of the decks. Now I've decided that I've already have it all done. So after this video, all of the decks should have guides correlating to each and every class that we go over. First one is going to be the Tempo Rogue at just above 2,000 dust. This was actually one of the strongest of the budget decks that we had played. It did very well in our deck guide. It slaughtered most of all of the control decks that we had played against. It's very fast paced, has a ton of burst damage even without Leroy. We have, I believe, one epic in the deck, and that's going to be Waggle Pick. And I don't think we even drew Waggle Pick the entire time in any of our deck guides. But anyway, what makes this deck so incredibly powerful is the fact that we're able to get on the board early. We have the ability to clear off our opponent's minions very easily with cards like Backstab, Sap, our weapon with Deadly Poison. From there, we use our stuff like Hook, Scimitar, Life Drinker, Spirit of the Shark to be able to do damage, generate value, and as we know, Evil Miscreant generates lackeys, and lackeys synergize very well with Spirit of the Shark and just do crazy things. So this super fun, it's actually not that hard of a deck to play either. I wouldn't say it's the easiest of the budget decks that we have, but it's not really the hardest. Like, you know, a lot of the turns, sometimes you'll have a pretty sophisticated turn, but normally like turn 3, Hench Clan Thug, turn 4, Hench Clan Burglar, Life Drinker, or maybe Spirit of the Shark, you know what I mean? So like the options per turn aren't maybe as crazy as some of the other decks that we're going to go over. The next one we're going to take a look at, and again, if we want more in-depth into the deck, we're going to take a look at that in our deck guide for this specific deck, but this is just a brief overview of what I think are the top 5. Next one's going to be the Token Druid. It hasn't really changed too much since the previous expansion. We've added a couple new cards, and that's going to be bees, because it's just a really good card. It adds many 1/1s onto the board, and then we're able to buff those if, for example, all the bees didn't trade into something. Also, you could be looking at the dust and be like, 4,280 dust, Rob, that's crazy. That's not a budget deck. Well, actually, the Snip Snap is the only reason this deck looks expensive, and everybody should have gotten Snip Snap for free, so that actually brings the Druid deck cost down to 2,680 if you take away the 1,600 from Snip Snap. So it's still under 3k dust, which I consider to be pretty budget. What makes this deck a little bit more than the 2,000 like the previous deck is the Sea Giant and the Whispering Woods. Sea Giant being a basic card from the classic set. So if you don't have Sea Giants, it's a really safe craft. It goes into Zoo, it goes into Token Druid, it goes into a lot of other decks that have been around, and it's a card that we see pop up almost every expansion during some form of deck. What makes this deck so powerful is, again, I wouldn't say similar to the Rogue. The Rogue puts a couple minions on the board, and they're a little bit heftier, like Clan Thug and things of that nature. This deck has just a ton of small minions, 1/1s, 2/1s, 1/2s, and then we use cards like Power of the Wild to buff them up. We use Savage Roar to like a big end game finisher. From there, in the late stages of the game, we have stuff like the Forest Aid, which makes a whole bunch of 2/2s. So if, like, you know, you're playing against a control deck that's been able to stop your early on onslaught, we can go ahead and clean up the late game with basically 4 rounds of 5 2/2s, and eventually your opponent will run out of removal. And I believe we have a really nice control warrior game for this particular deck. That it doesn't really, it doesn't look good, and then I don't want to ruin it, but this deck pulls some really juicy things. But again, guys, if you're looking for more detail, it'll be in the deck guide of this, which will be in the description. I'll include those video links. Looking at the Beast Hunter or Midrange Hunter, again, this is probably along with the Rogue very, very powerful. It's, again, not the hardest deck to play, and it just, if you're playing against a greedy control deck, looking at you Pocket Galaxy mages out there, I mean, this deck just slaughters them. I mean, between basically just having a minion to play every turn 1 through basically 6, because the curve is fairly low and we run a lot of duplicates. The only singleton we have is Shimmerfly and Flare, and Flare is in there because there's a lot of mages and a lot of hunters, but once that meta changes, you can change the Flare for another Shimmerfly. It's just the Flare is working really good in this particular meta with all of the secrets being around, but as we maybe if there's a shift, you can take Flare out. But again, very similar to the Beast Hunter that we've seen in the past. I believe this is the cheapest out of all of the decks at 1,840 dust, and it actually contains 2 legendaries, if you didn't know. Savannah Highmane has to be one of the best 6-drops in the game, if not the best 6-drop, maybe besides Reno, which is actually a legendary. But yeah, Savannah Highmane's insane. Double Tundra Rhino, if one of the Tundra Rhino sticks, being able to play a Savannah Highmane, hit your opponent in the face because it gets charged is insane. And then, you know, being able to combo stuff like the Master's Call with your Dire Frenzy when you put it on maybe cards like Vicious Scalehide or Scavenging Hyena is just insane. So really powerful hunter deck here, very, very cheap, and it'll do you well. And this deck has no new cards in it. There's absolutely no new cards in this deck. A lot of players will think, hey, you know, a new set came out, I have to play with the new cards. Not exactly. You're able to play with stuff like this and do really, really well because this deck has been refined. There's a lot of people playing greedy decks out there. The Luna's Pocket, like for example, if you're playing against the Mage and they Luna's Pocket Galaxy on 5, they're not doing anything while you're developing maybe a Tundra Rhino or a Savannah Highmane if you have coin. So really solid. We'll probably play this deck actually a little bit more and see if we can get some high ranks with this hunter deck, because I have faith that this hunter deck will actually do really, really well right now. Taking a look at our next deck, that's going to be the Mech Priest. Again, very similar to the Mech Priest we had built a little bit ago, but we added a couple new cards and changed some things around, looking at Evil Conscriptor. Also, I don't know if I mentioned, so I'm gonna make this quick cut. If you look at the dust count, you're like, Rob, holy shit, again, 4,560 dust. That's insane. That's not a budget deck. Again, this deck does contain Snip Snap, which was a free legendary, so I really don't count that towards the cost of the dust. If you logged in during a pretty long period, you got him. So if we take the 1,600 and we minus that, that goes down to 2,960. And what even makes that expensive is Ziliax. By now, all of us should have Ziliax. He's the best neutral legendary you could have, probably besides the new Zephyr guy. So that actually brings the deck even lower to like somewhere in like the 900 to 1100 range. So that's why this deck looks expensive, but it actually isn't. These legendaries, especially Snip Snap, you should have gotten for free. The goal of this deck, very similar to most mech decks, is to be aggressive, get on the board. But what this mech deck has that other mech decks don't is the fact that we actually run the combo, the Divine Spirit Inner Fire. For those of you not familiar with that, Divine Spirit doubles the minion's HP, and then Inner Fire makes the HP equal to the attack. So for example, if we have an underpowered Steambot or Bastion, which has 9 HP, and that card lives and it has 9 HP, you're able to make it 18, double it up again, make it 32, and from there, or 34, and then just Inner Fire it and win the game from there. So it's super sick. The deck creams people. Again, videos for each of these, description below. I know there's gonna be questions on that. Rob, why don't you play the deck? It's all there. I got it all set up, and if it's not there yet, give it a day or two. I don't want to overload you with videos, so I'll probably post this one and then one of the videos and then 2 tomorrow. So if they're not all there yet, just give it time. I don't want to just flood the YouTube with like 5 videos for each deck. I'll do like, you know, 2 videos a day until we get them all done. Definitely don't want to overload you guys. And then from here, our last deck is going to be the Murloc Shaman. It wouldn't be a budget deck guide without throwing in the Murlocs. This deck is exceedingly fast, and again, it punishes those slow decks, and you can win by turn 4 or 5 most games if the board goes unchecked, and that's because of stuff like Bloodlust, and you're able to combo all of your minions with Soul of the Murloc, which is basically just a mini Soul of the Forest if you're familiar and have played the Token Druid deck, which does run Soul of the Forest. And Underbelly Angler is insane for value. I mean, this deck basically, like I said, left unchecked, just goes, as we can see, it tops out at 5 mana. So most of the time, turn 1 you have a play, turn 2 you have a play, turn 3 you have a play. And that's a very signature sign that you'll see with a lot of these more aggressive style decks, is that the curve is very low and you're basically playing 1 to 2 minions every single turn, and if your opponent just can't deal with it, you win. And that's what makes the consistency of these aggro decks, is because you just constantly have plays. You have refill with Murloc Tasty Fin. If that guy dies, you draw 2 Murlocs. Evil Totem generates lackeys. Lackeys can generate spells and other minions. Underbelly Angler, every time you play a Murloc, you generate one. So It's just good stuff. The deck performed very well. I mean, all of these decks performed very well. And last thing, there's Rob, why didn't you include Zoo? And that's because I played with Zoo, and unfortunately I couldn't tweak a budget Zoo deck to perform as well as I wanted, so I migrated to some of the other decks that we've gone over, and they just did better. Because if I'm going to present to you guys decks, especially budget decks, I play with them, I need to know that they're good and they work, and that's why the Zoo didn't make the cut, because for me, I couldn't get it to work as well as I wanted it to, and these other decks did perform how I wanted them to. But we do have Zoo decks, the Lackey Zoo, which we also already made a video of. But yeah, so there's why there's Zoo that is not in the list, even though that is normally one of the budget decks that we cover. So with that, hopefully you've enjoyed, guys. If I missed out on anything, you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to leave that in the comment section below. That's what it's there for, is to help you guys. And yeah, see you in the deck videos, see you in the deck guides, and see you later, dudes. Thanks for watching, and happy whatever the hell day it is.